Before getting into today's stories, let me know where everyone is from and what time so we can send wishes of health and luck to you and your relatives and friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos of our channel. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's get started. Story 1. Breakups are hard, Mia muttered to herself, watching raindrops race down the window of her small apartment. It had been 3 months since she and Ethan ended their relationship of 3 years. Her therapist had suggested focusing on new hobbies, but nothing seemed to fill the void. The evenings were the worst, quiet, lonely, and filled with memories she couldn't shake off. That Thursday, silence became unbearable. "I need to get out of here," she whispered, throwing on a jacket. She decided to visit a small bar a few blocks away, one she and Ethan used to frequent. As she entered, the smell of old wood and faint cigarette smoke hit her. The dim lighting made the place feel familiar, almost comforting. She ordered a drink and sat at a corner booth, her mind wandering to the nights she and Ethan had spent there, playing pool and laughing over silly bets. Still sitting alone? A voice startled her. She turned to see a man, perhaps in his early 30s, standing by her table. His scruffy appearance and confident smirk didn't match the mellow vibe of the bar. "Just enjoying a quiet night," she replied cautiously, gripping her glass. "Quiet's overrated," he said, sliding into the seat across from her without waiting for an invitation. "Name's Kyle. You look like you could use some company." Mia hesitated but decided to play along. "Mia," she said, forcing a polite smile. Kyle's eyes darted around the room as if searching for something. "You come here often?" "I used to," she admitted. "Not so much anymore." They chatted for a while. Kyle's stories about traveling and odd jobs were entertaining enough, but something about him felt off. His laugh seemed rehearsed, his gaze too intense. "Want to play a game of pool?" he asked suddenly, gesturing to the tables in the back. Mia hesitated. The idea of revisiting a shared activity with Ethan felt strange, but she nodded. "Why not?" Kyle grinned and led the way. The bar's pool table area was quieter, with only one other group playing in the corner. Mia racked the balls while Kyle retrieved cues. "Ladies first," he said, stepping aside. As the game progressed, Mia realized Kyle wasn't very good. He missed easy shots and seemed more interested in watching her than playing. It made her skin crawl. "You're good at this," he said, leaning on his cue. "Let me guess. Your ex taught you?" Mia froze. "How do you know about that?" Kyle's smile widened. "Lucky guess." Unnerved, Mia forced a laugh. "Well, I've had a lot of practice," she said, taking her next shot. "What about you? Seems like you're more into watching than playing." Kyle shrugged. "I'm more of a spectator. I guess people fascinate me. The way they move, the little things they do without realizing it." Mia's unease deepened. "Sounds like you've spent a lot of time watching people." Kyle leaned in slightly, his tone dropping to something almost conspiratorial. "You'd be surprised what you can learn just by paying attention. Like you, for instance. I can tell you're not here just to play pool." Mia's grip on her cue tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" He tilted his head, studying her. "You're restless, looking for something, or maybe running from something." She forced a smile, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're reading too much into it." "Am I?" Kyle's eyes narrowed. "You know I've seen you before." Mia's stomach dropped. "What?" "Where? Here, a while back," he said casually. "With someone else, a guy, tall, dark hair." "You two look close." She stared at him, trying to mask her shock. "You must be mistaken." Kyle's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe, or maybe not." The tension was unbearable. "Thanks for the game," she said abruptly, grabbing her jacket. "I should head home." "Oh, come on," Kyle protested. "One more game." "Another time," she said firmly, heading toward the exit. Kyle's voice stopped her. "Mia!" She turned slowly. His expression had changed. The playful charm was gone, replaced by something darker. "You left your scarf," he said, holding it up. Mia frowned. She didn't remember bringing a scarf. "Thanks," she said cautiously, taking it from him. As she walked home, unease settled in her chest. She glanced over her shoulder but saw nothing unusual. At home, Mia locked the door and tossed the scarf onto the couch. Something shiny caught her eye. Inside the folds was a small black device, Her heart raced as she realized it was a tracker. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. "Nice place you've got. Sleep tight, Mia." She stared at the message, her mind racing. Kyle. It had to be him. Panic set in as she dialed the police, explaining the situation. They assured her someone would drive by her house that night, but the hours crawled by in silence. At 2 a.m., a faint knock echoed through the apartment. Mia froze. It came again, louder this time. "Mia, open the door. We need to talk," Kyle's voice called. She grabbed her phone and hid in the bathroom, dialing 911 again. "He's here," she whispered. "Please, hurry." Outside, Kyle's voice turned angry. "You think you can just ignore me? After all the trouble I went through to find you?" The sound of something scraping against the door made her heart pound. "You can't hide forever," he said, his voice chillingly calm. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. The noise stopped. Mia waited, her breath shallow until a firm knock came. "Police!" She opened the door to find officers outside. Kyle was gone. The next day, Mia replaced her locks and installed cameras, but the fear lingered. Weeks passed without any sign of him, but every shadow, every unfamiliar face on the street made her heart race. One evening, she received another message. "Miss me." Mia stared at the screen, a chill running down her spine. He was still out there, watching, waiting. Story 2. Long shifts always drag on, thought Lily, as she closed up the small coffee shop where she worked. The rain had started earlier that evening, tapping against the windows as if to remind her she still had to walk home. Her usual routine was to hop on the late bus, but tonight she felt uneasy. The streets were unusually quiet, save for the occasional car splashing through puddles. "Just another night," she muttered to herself, pulling her hood tighter as she walked to the bus stop. When the bus finally arrived, it screeched to a halt, its headlights reflecting off the wet pavement. Lily stepped aboard, greeted by the familiar hum of the engine and the faint scent of disinfectant. The bus was mostly empty, with just a few passengers scattered throughout. She chose a seat near the middle, close enough to the driver to feel safe, but far enough to avoid small talk. As she settled in, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her roommate. "Don't forget to lock the door when you get in. Weird stuff happening lately." Lily sighed and put her phone away, glancing around the bus. That's when she noticed him. A man sitting in the back row, staring straight ahead, his face partially obscured by the shadows. Something about his stillness made her uneasy. The bus jolted as it pulled away from the stop, and Lily tried to shake off the feeling. "It's just another passenger," she told herself. But as the bus moved through the city, the man's presence grew harder to ignore. He wasn't doing anything. No phone, no book, not even looking out the window. He just sat there unmoving like a statue. "Long night?" The driver's voice interrupted her thoughts. Lily blinked and nodded. "Yeah, just ready to get home." The driver chuckled. "Aren't we all?" As the bus made its way through the rain-soaked streets, the other passengers gradually got off one by one. Soon it was just Lily and the man in the back. She could feel his eyes on her now, though she didn't dare turn around. Her stop was coming up. She pressed the button and stood, gripping the pole as the bus slowed. As she moved toward the door, she stole a glance at the man. He was staring directly at her. His expression was blank, but his eyes held something she couldn't quite place. Curiosity? Malice? Both? "Excuse me," Lily said suddenly, her voice shaky but firm. She turned halfway, trying to appear confident. "Do you need something?" The man tilted his head slightly, his lips curling into an almost imperceptible smile. "Why do you think I need something?" Her heart raced, but she forced herself to answer. "You've been staring." He chuckled, a low, unsettling sound. "Maybe I find you interesting." "Well, I'd prefer if you didn't," she said quickly, stepping closer to the exit. "Interesting people don't get to make those kinds of decisions," he replied, his tone casual, but his words carrying a weight that made her skin crawl. "Don't you think?" Lily froze, gripping the pole tighter. "What are you talking about?" He leaned forward slightly, the shadows shifting across his face. "You're the type who doesn't notice things until it's too late." Her breath hitched. "What does that mean?" The man leaned back again, his expression returning to its unnerving calm. "You'll see." The bus came to a halt, jolting her out of her panic. Her stop. She darted to the door without looking back and stepped off into the rain. But the relief of leaving was short-lived. She heard the sound of footsteps behind her, splashing against the wet pavement. Turning, she saw him. He had gotten off at her stop too. "Excuse me," she said, trying to sound confident. "Can I help you?" The man tilted his head, his lips curving into a faint smile. "You dropped this," he said, holding up a scarf. Lily frowned. "That's not mine." His smile didn't falter. "Are you sure?" She backed away. "Yes, I'm sure." The man's smile faded, replaced by an unsettling calm. "All right then, have a good night." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Lily hurried home, her heart racing. But when she reached her apartment door, she froze. The scarf he had held was draped over her doorknob. Inside, Lily locked the door and double-checked every window. She turned on all the lights and tried to convince herself it was just a coincidence. Maybe the man was just strange, but harmless. Her phone buzzed. It was another message from her roommate. "Did you hear about that guy on the news? The one following women home?" Lily's stomach dropped. She typed a quick response. "What are you talking about?" Her roommate replied almost immediately. "They said he's been leaving scarves or other things to mark their doors. Be careful." Lily's hands shook as she reread the messages. She glanced at the door, the image of the scarf burning in her mind. Suddenly there was a knock. It was soft, almost polite. "Lily," a voice called from the other side. "You forgot your scarf." Her blood ran cold. She backed away, clutching her phone. "I'm calling the police," she shouted. Silence. Then the sound of footsteps retreating. Lily stayed frozen until she heard the distant wail of sirens. When the police arrived, they found no one outside, but the scarf was gone. For weeks, Lily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She avoided the bus, took different routes home, and always made sure her door was locked. But every so often, she'd find something small, a coin, a keychain, a piece of paper, left near her door. Each time, her fear grew. One night, as she was drifting off to sleep, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You forgot your scarf again." Lily stared at the screen, her heart pounding. He was still out there, watching, waiting. Story 3. It was a typical Thursday evening, and Emma was exhausted after her double shift at the diner. The streets glistened with the remnants of a late afternoon rain, and the crisp autumn air carried a hint of damp leaves. Emma stopped by the local grocery store on her way home. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as she pushed a squeaky cart down the aisles, mentally checking off items from her list. "Milk, bread, eggs," she muttered to herself. The store was mostly empty, save for an elderly couple near the produce section and a cashier scrolling through their phone. Emma welcomed the quiet. As she reached for a carton of milk, she felt it. A presence. She glanced over her shoulder and saw a man standing at the end of the aisle. He wasn't doing anything, just staring. His hood was pulled low over his face, and his hands were stuffed into his pockets. Emma offered a polite nod and turned back to her cart, trying to ignore the unease creeping up her spine. The man didn't move. Emma quickly finished grabbing the rest of her items and headed to the checkout counter. She felt her pulse quicken when she saw the man lingering near the entrance, leaning against a display of magazines. He seemed to be watching her, though his face was obscured. The cashier gave her a tired smile. "Find everything okay?" "Yeah," Emma replied, her voice tighter than she intended. She fumbled with her wallet, glancing nervously at the man. He was gone. Relief washed over her as she bagged her groceries and stepped outside into the chilly night. But as she walked to her car, she spotted him again, standing under a streetlight at the far end of the parking lot. His head tilted slightly, as if he were studying her. Emma forced herself to stay calm. She unlocked her car, loaded the groceries, and slid into the driver's seat. Her hands trembled as she started the engine. The man didn't move, but his presence was suffocating. Back at her apartment, Emma locked the door and double-checked the windows. She tried to shake off the encounter, telling herself it was just a random guy. But as she unpacked her groceries, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Did you forget something?" Emma froze. She stared at the message, her mind racing. She hadn't given her number to anyone. Heart pounding, she typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. A knock at the door made her jump. It was soft, almost hesitant. Emma approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. No one was there. She stepped back, her breath shallow. Another knock, this time louder. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice wavering. Silence. She glanced at her phone, debating whether to call the police. A new message appeared. Check the porch. Her stomach churned. Slowly, she opened the door just a crack. A single grocery bag sat on the porch. Inside was a carton of milk, the same brand she had bought earlier, but the expiration date was different. She hadn't noticed it before, but now it felt like a deliberate detail. Emma spent the next day trying to forget the encounter, but as evening came, her anxiety returned. She paced her apartment, locking and unlocking the door repeatedly. When her phone buzzed again, she hesitated before looking at it. Unknown number. You didn't finish your shopping. Her heart pounded as she typed back, Who are you? What do you want? The reply came almost instantly. Just trying to help. Emma sat down on the couch, her hands trembling. Her phone buzzed again. What's your favorite aisle? I think I know. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. This time it was louder, more deliberate. Who is it? She shouted, trying to keep her voice steady. Emma, a man's voice replied, calm and measured. You left something behind. I didn't leave anything, she said, backing away from the door. Are you sure? He asked. Check your bag. Emma looked at the groceries she had unpacked hours ago. Her heart sank as she noticed a small slip of paper tucked between the bread and eggs. It was a receipt, but not hers. On it, a handwritten note. Don't ignore me, she screamed. Leave me alone. I'm calling the police. The man outside chuckled. You won't. You don't even know who I am. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Don't be scared. We're just getting started. The police arrived shortly after, but there was little they could do. The doorbell camera had captured only static, and the messages came from an untraceable number. Days turned into weeks, and Emma's fear morphed into paranoia. She avoided the grocery store and changed her routine, but the messages continued. One night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Sleep tight, Emma. Don't forget to lock the door. Her breath hitched. She scrambled out of bed and checked every lock in the apartment. Everything was secure, but when she returned to her room, she